Good morning. All righty.
Hi, Larissa.
Hi, Thandy.
Now you know who's on the call. We've got Larissa, we've got Thandy, and we've got Izane. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Just to mention right up front that the recording will be available on our YouTube channel within a day or two. We'll also have a complete list. I think there's, if I remember, about 120 line items of what is changing or will be changing between the old Procurement Act and the new one. We're not going to go through all 117, 120, I forget how many, but we'll put the whole list on our website as well. So you're welcome to type your questions in the chat as we progress. And yeah, let's kick off this very, let's call it interesting topic. So you'd all agree that procurement and bidding are not two separate things. It's two sides of the same coin. We sell something, someone buys something. Now, South Africa at the moment is in the middle of a significant public sector, let's call it reform. Sounds very, very serious. But what's important to know is that the current framework still applies. And the Public Procurement Act has been enacted, but the operating framework is not fully enforced yet. So everything we're going to talk about today is true, is ready, but it is not law yet. Okay. Now, you would have seen that there's been 2 rounds inviting feedback, and Thandy, who is our very specialist in procurement, she'll be able to correct me if I do go off the wrong track, but I doubt that there'll be another one after the second one we've had. So the draft regulations right now shows the direction and the likely areas of impact. Today is not a legal briefing. It is a practical discussion about what businesses should understand and prepare for. Because if you do any work with any government organization, any public sector organization, this will affect you. Okay, because procurement, the design of the procurement regulations upstream shapes what we as bidders can do downstream. So let me quickly introduce my 2 panelists. Thandy Pino, who is an absolute specialist in public procurement. You would have seen her CV, her resume, her credentials on the invite. She's also the founder and owner of Intaka Consulting. Larissa Cornelius, not a new face to these webinars, CEO and Chief Win Strategist at nFold. I'm Izane Cloete-Hamilton, COO and Master of Inspiration at nFold. I'll be facilitating today, and my 2 panelists will be taking, I almost said all the shots, not those shots, but the difficult question shots. All right. So if you're ready, let's go. I'm really gonna ask the first question to Thandy, and it's about sketching the background, the context. I like to have a little bit of background and context before we delve right deep into what we're dealing with. So before we look at these changes, Thandy, what was fundamentally not working well enough in the existing procurement framework that made this level of reform and change necessary? You're on mute. I win a prize.
Okay. Good morning again, colleagues. And thank you, Izane, with that song. I was called and it helped. It's a nice song. I don't know who produced that thing, but it's nice. So yeah, a bit of background in terms of why we are where we are is because government procurement, especially in terms of legislation framework, it has been fragmented in terms of sitting in many pieces of legislation. And some along the way, they end up even contradicting each other. For example, legislations that are talking to transformation, you have a Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act, you have a BEE Act. The goal for the two pieces of legislation is transformation. But now you have Triple P saying you can't use BEE, and BEE is still active. Now one is confused. You have your act that talks to local economic development, like your local content, and local content, it was brought through the regulation 2017, and then they were found to be unconstitutional. So now we are struggling to say, okay, we still have to do local content, but what legislation then empowers us to do that? And the founding of these of this practice was sitting with MFMA and PFMA. MFMA is from government departments, PFMA is from the municipality. And I always say MFMA was created to fix PFMA. So PFMA is one of the oldest legislations that we have. It was never reformed as we progress. So what they've been doing is try to put pieces of instruction notes to try to fix whatever that is needed in procurement. And this is the same PFMA that started with a tender board and moving towards currently institutions of government being responsible for their own procurement. So, and then you have CIDB. And then CIDB, what's interesting about CIDB, when you look at other industry-specific legislation like your CRAS, your ICASAS and everything, CIDB is the only specific industry act that talks to procurement, So there was a lot of these pieces of legislation that are all over the place. And then as buyers, now you end up being confused, and also you get exposed to litigations as well. That's the one part. But the other part is you have businesses that need opportunities. They are confused. They are really, really confused, because today you're working with City of Joburg. It's a municipality. You understand the legislative framework, and you think you'll go to Ekurhuleni or City of Joburg. I mean, you'll get the same. No, City of Cape Town is doing something different. And all of that are coming from Section 217 of the Constitution, which has not changed. It's still the same to date. So the whole rationale or the thinking or the understanding or the plan behind legislating this was to say, can we have a firm position? Can we just be clear on where are we going and how are we going about it? Because we're not only affecting the government institutions who are the buyers that have to comply with transparency and audit and all of that. AG comes always complain about irregular expenditure and all of that, which makes it government look very bad. But on the other end, we have also the economic stimulation. Government procurement is one of the biggest economic stimulation in terms of local economic development. So now, I mean, we had the news now that the unemployment rate it's gone high again. And we know that SMMEs are one of the biggest employers in the economy. So those SMEs, we have construction sitting with government. We have professional services sitting with government. So when you have such not happening the way it's supposed to happen, it trickles down to that economic empowerment again for the business, for the people and all of that. So the whole idea was to say, you know what, can we just get rid of everything and just have one point of reference, not only for the government as buyers, but for the business community as well. I mean, I think we know what happened when the regulation was found to be unconstitutional. We moved from BE level. People are still confused about specific goals even to date, because every organ of state have their own specific goals. So the whole idea is still, again, moving towards uniformity and also moving towards a point to say, can we just be clear on how government does work? So that's basically the whole rationale behind it.
Okay. So do you think that the changes that are being made or what's the word, proposed, do you think that these changes will reshape and fix these challenges? So are we moving from a system, for example, where preference mainly affects how a bidder scores to one where it can determine whether a bidder gets through the door at all? What is changing there?
Yeah. That's the main change. As you're saying, preference was about getting scored a point. If you don't comply, you still go through, but now it becomes a qualification criteria. But also, if you look at the Procurement Act in terms of that pre-qualification, the list is very long. actually. Remember with your 2017 regulation, your pre-qualification was based on a BEE level and subcontracting. Those were the two components that you would pay base your pre-qual. But now when you go look at the Act, it's quite broad. There's women-owned businesses, youth-owned businesses, SMMEs, and all of that. So they've given government institution a bigger basket to use in terms of preference. So one, if you look at it at a glance, you might think of it as exclusion, but it's not really exclusion. It's just that the risk, though, you will still find certain organs of state only using one aspect of preference. Certain organs of state maybe only using Black people only, or women-owned business only, So that is the risk, or perhaps the disadvantage of it. But the point is that the intention is still not to exclude. It's still not. It's still about to be intentional about it, but not to exclude. But there's a risk. There is a risk to it because as you correctly say, with BEE and BEE level, if you don't have a BEE level, you get a 0. You still proceed, and sometimes actually in 90-10, you can still get a business if you even score 0 on your specific goal. But now with this one, because it's a pre-qual, you are now thrown off at the beginning. So yeah.
So Larissa, I think this is where the bigger question comes in for me, because Thandy's explained it from the procurement side, but we represent the bidding side. So what does change commercially for bidders? What's the impact on the bidders?
So Laura? Yeah, I think, it's good for Thandy's giving the perspective of the regulations and what's changing from a procurement perspective. And thanks, Thandy, for explaining that there's lots of regulations. The idea is to simplify it for both procurement teams and for businesses. So if we look at the business side, how does it impact us as bidders? What kind of things do we need to think about? I think it changes where we need to start. So historically, many businesses have approached a tender asking, can we win this opportunity? And under the suggested changes on the draft regulations, there's actually an earlier question we need to ask when we are qualifying to pursue an opportunity or not, which is, can we actually compete for this opportunity at all? And that distinction is quite significant. So the draft regulations, and again, Thandy can correct me where correct us where we're wrong, but the draft regulations currently propose that there's 3 different preferential procurement mechanisms linked to different contract value bands. At the lower end, there are proposed set-asides. So that means that certain amounts of work are set aside for different, as Thandy said, whether it's women businesses, whether it's Black-owned businesses, whether it's youth-owned businesses, whether it's disabled-owned businesses. The draft currently provides 4 set-asides where the estimated contract value or an unbundled portion of it does not exceed 20 million rand, subject to conditions including there being significant qualifying suppliers in the target category. What that means is that the procurement teams are having to do market research. Not that this is new to procurement teams. There is actually a lot of work that happens before tenders go out to market, but they will be set aside. So for contracts between 20, so that's for contracts that do not exceed 20 million, could be set aside for specific preference groups.
Like SMEs or regional or women-owned.
Women-owned, exactly. And then for contracts between 20 million and 100 million, the draft introduces proposed pre-qualification mechanisms. So that could be, there could be some pre-qualifications that you've got to be, I don't know, BE level 1 and at least 51% women-owned. I'm just using a random example. And then at 100 million and above, subcontracting may potentially become a condition of a bid where the required feasibility conditions are met. So subcontracting for very large contracts will likely become compulsory. That's something we actually saw in previous regulations where I think there used to be about 30%.
Yeah.
So that's, we will probably see that coming back in again for large bids. Important, though, to underline that we're talking about draft regulations. So these amounts and requirements may still change before the regulations become final. But I think the commercial signal here is what is important. For bidders, eligibility is no longer something we can discover 3 days after the tender comes out. I think that's important. We are going to have a much better understanding of our position before opportunities reach the market. So if a pre-qualification criteria is that you need to be a Black-owned woman business, I'm just using that as an example, and you're not, you cannot qualify for that particular opportunity. So I think what this means is we need to understand more than our BE level. We need to understand our ownership profile. We need to understand our procurement spend. So some more of the deep dive detail of where we are situated. Typically, you'll get that in your BE report. And it also means knowing suppliers, subcontractors, and potential partners available to ourselves. And it may mean that we need to understand a little bit more where we may need to partner, create consortiums or joint ventures or subcontractors before the starting date. So I think it's not a compliance issue. It's more about how can we influence or understand the pursuit and our sales strategies going forward. Because our route to market may increasingly determine whether we're able to get our foot in the front door for specific opportunities. So I think qualification or bid, no bid needs to become far more intelligent. And we need to make sure as businesses, we prepare ourselves for these changes.
But it sounds to me that the qualification or the bid, no bid is no longer just can we technically do this? Can I supply water bottles? Yes, I can supply water bottles. But if I do not adhere to the pre-qualification requirements, it doesn't matter how great my water bottles are, how cheap my water bottles are, that my water bottles can make tea as well, I cannot compete. So this actually means that businesses need to know themselves a lot better than what they do. And it's not just gung-ho, shoot from the hip, and we'll make a plan when we get there. They need to know upfront whether it is good return on investment, whether it makes financial sense to even pursue this opportunity. Yeah, okay.
All right, maybe just to add, as I'm listening to Larissa speaking, we had Sean and Professor Kino rolled out these sessions where public procurement professionals were engaging with the regulations and talking about certain things that are not practical to implement and everything. Even National Treasury indicated that they receive a lot of feedback from the business from our community pertaining to this. And I wonder if that also happened from the business community side, to say that did the business community also engage to this detail? Because as Larissa is speaking, I'm thinking to myself, wow, actually there is quite a lot also that this is going to impact the business community, some to some extent in a negative way, or some to some extent you have to have additional financial investment that you have to make as a business to be able to position yourself for these opportunities, and as I'm listening, I can tell you right now, it was a blind spot from our side as the practitioners. We were looking from the practice point of view. Is it easy for us to be able to implement this act and avoid irregular expenditure in AG? But now I'm listening to Lisa. I'm like, wow, there's another recipient of this regulation. How are they affected? Because also
two sides of the coin.
Two sides of the same coin. And also, as I'm listening, the one thing that came out also, which one of the reasons why we had this act was the cost of procurement from the government point of view in terms of how costly preferential procurement is. So now what's happening is that it is still going to come to that cost again. it's going to be not only cost to government, but it will also be cost to the business as well. And now when you look at these businesses that are starting up, because right now with our economy, I mean, self-employment is the way to go. Gig economy is booming, So as a business now, you need to have money to be able to participate and get these opportunities.
So I'm liking it that you call it a blind spot, because even though the intent with the draft regulations are good, there are some downsides to it as well. It's not all moonshine and roses, and we'll get to a few of the gaps or the downsides shortly. But I can't say that business has not had these forums. I doubt it, but I've not seen on social media or it coming across my desk that, as you've mentioned, Sean, and the professor having those sessions for procurement, I haven't seen that happening for business, which is, by the way, one of the reasons we're doing this is to inform business, our community on the bidder side. Guys, it's coming, understand it, prepare, because it's not going to be business as usual the day after this is enacted. You need to prepare for it.
Yeah, we did run it. We were before the bill came out, we did run sessions where we provided feedback. I think we did that from an APMP Sub-Saharan Africa perspective. For those on the call that don't know APMP, it's Association of Proposal Management Professionals. And what this is now is the draft regulations, which will really say how will that act be put into practice. And you're right, that hasn't occurred, but there is definitely, I think it is quite expensive for business, and I don't want to derail too much, Izane, but businesses have invested a lot in BE, and basically that the areas now where this will concentrate it will impact that, and we've already started to see that impact in industry. So it's not new, because we've already been dealing with the specific bill changes where procurement can, as per the Preferential Regulation Act, choose these items. What we're just seeing in terms of what these drafts are suggesting is that it's going to be a lot more formulated, and we're going to see a more consistency. So I suppose in a consistency perspective, that will make it a little bit easier for us to be less confused, but it may preclude us in certain cases from certain opportunities unless we think cleverly about partnering or cleverly about investing in certain areas.
And that's the challenge, because if your procurement level below the 20 million, those are SMEs, EMEs, SMEs. And it's already costly for SMEs for an entrepreneur to set up a business, comply with everything. So I am concerned about the smaller ones, but at the same time, the smaller organizations, knowing that it's likely that the subcontracting at the high level will be enacted, it's a good idea now to not wait for the big guys to come look for the little guys, but the little guys go and start your conversations with the big guys. Prepare. I think that's the big thing that I want to get across is prepare. It's coming. Don't get caught. But so, Thandy, so if we look beyond just these preferences and what's changing in the procurement and the evaluation process, and what's most likely to change bidder behavior, how do you think bidder behavior should change rather than just compliance?
I think one thing though is that you with time we will still get to a point where the more things change, the more they remain the same. Because honestly, because really in the end, government is still looking for competent suppliers. That will never change. We are still looking for competent suppliers, and this is what you guys do and emphasize a lot with your community. I mean, if this whole 90-10 and 80-20 was all and beginning and end, we will still not have companies that score 0 getting business, you know? So as much as transformation is important, the core or the key thing about government is to getting somebody who can deliver what I need. And I think that will then still become a solid competitive advantage for a bidder. To say, you know what, still make sure that you are able to do what you do. But also one thing that people need to be cautious of, I always caution around this thing that I call malicious compliance. You know, you comply because it's a requirement. Especially now that you're bringing this whole thing of networking and subcontracting and consortiums and everything, please guys, vet the people that you're going to be doing business with.
Yep.
Because those people are going to literally get you blacklisted. I've went to that register of suppliers that are restricted. I was shocked by the reasons that companies are being blacklisted for 10 years from doing business with government. You know, like municipalities and government institutions are becoming so aware of this blacklisting thing, and they are doing it, you know. So the main thing is that, as I said, one thing that is remaining the same, please invest in your competency. Please invest in doing your job well, but equally vet your people that you're going to be collaborating with. Because people are desperate. People are desperate. People are looking for opportunities. There's a lot of blind spots. I think if you've seen on the regulation also, there's a requirement for vetting, where a government institution now must vet. I mean, because of the Matlanga Commission and Ket Matlala, by law to date, government institutions don't have a legal basis to disqualify Ket. Action. They don't have a legal base to disqualify Ket. So now they're coming with creative ways to manage reputational risk, to don't find themselves appointing Ket and having to explain to ENCA and everything and all of that. So with that, there's this chapter, there's a section on the regulation that talks about vetting, whereby we were actually talking about, do we have to vet everyone? Can't we vet only the highest point scorer? But the point is, to the business community, you are going to be vetted. And you don't want to find yourself being linked with Thandy, who has done some scandal somewhere, because it's not only about going to be Thandy, it's going to be you and your people, you know. So
by association.
By association, you know. So I think for me, more than anything is, don't lose hope. You know, there are many changes that are coming, and we're just going to keep it a bit rough before we find our feet in it. But if you know what you're doing, I follow Lerato Sebata also. And I remember one time she had this interesting post around the kind of services that are available that people are sleeping on. You know, I think she was talking about refuse removal, I was talking about environmental management, those specialist kind of services where you'll even find a re-advert, not because it's a re-advert because nobody responded, you know. So now start focusing on those niche markets, you know, find the niche, capitalize on them, be good at them, you'll still find work. But be careful about desperate people out there who want business opportunities.
So what I'm hearing and hoping for is that the intention is stronger governance and better procurement outcomes. It's not just a different preference model. There really are good intentions behind it. I also saw in the draft a lot more focus placed on evidence of your capability and your credible delivery, and that's clearly for to avoid situations where a company that was formed last week can win a 30 million rand tender today in an industry that they've never even done a day's work in. So evidence
and to judge you people. To judge you people are bringing fake reference letters.
See, I wanted to talk about reference letters now, but you're right. Reference letters are very important. Contactable references are very important, but it will be checked. It will be vetted. So don't be the desperate person and fake them, because you'll not only be discarded and disqualified, there is that beautiful blacklist. So you don't want to be on that, because then you're precluded from doing business with any government any government entity for 10 years.
And not only the company and directors.
Yes.
So even if you open another company, you are out. In Lesotho, actually, what we are doing in Lesotho, we are even checking if you are blacklisted in other countries. Because what we do in Lesotho, we get a lot of funding from your African Development Bank, your World Bank and everything. World Bank blacklist companies, African Development Bank blacklist companies. There's this website called Development Aid. When you go there, you'll be shocked about companies that are blacklisted there. So if you think that they blacklisted in Rwanda and we won't know, in Lesotho, we're going to know because we're going to check, you know? So more than anything, I think now we need to be, as you're saying about the governance part, you know, and the evidence. And we know that you guys are using AI now. So we don't care about AI, we care about evidence.
Yeah. So talking about AI and evidence, Laura, what do you, from a bidder point of view, stronger evidence, technical substantiation, real differentiation, what does it mean for bidders? What do we need to demonstrate to cross those gates?
No, absolutely. So yeah, I think there is definitely a growing emphasis on evidence. And what that means is there's a lot more evidence. So as Thandy mentioned, you know, it's worth going and looking at the tender defaulters list and seeing what get companies there. And you'd be quite surprised. Obviously, fraud and fraudulent documents are high on that list. Another one is actually not delivering. So
non-delivery, yeah.
Being careful about not actually delivering what you promised to deliver, because your proposal forms the basis of your contract. But on the growing emphasis of evidence, and I think evidence has always been important from an evaluation perspective, but they are going to look to be a lot more specific. So, you know, it may no longer just be a reference letter is enough. You know, they may want evidence of your purchase order. They may want your project closeout. You know, and they will be testing different things, right? A reference letter shows, you know, how well you delivered a service and whether you delivered it on time, whether you delivered it on budget, whereas a project closeout only proves, you know, that you've completed the project. And a purchase order will show that you've followed actual you've actually followed the process, the procurement process, which, you know, as businesses, we shouldn't be doing business without a purchase order in public sector, because then you risk not getting paid. And as Thandy said, you know, there's a lack of there's a lot of sort of distrust of AI coming out and writing your proposals and making things look amazing. But actually, it's about putting together very factual input and being able to support what you say. So not just saying things like we have extensive experience, we provide world-class service, we're a highly skilled team. It's going to be providing, you know, those CVs and possibly, you know, making sure that those people are available, that they've signed permission for you to send their documents as per the POPI Act, that they are available for the time period, etc. So it's really about proving it. I don't think this is new, just more that we need to get better as businesses doing it, because in our experience,
there's more emphasis on it. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, in our experiences, and we know, we still see but so many businesses struggling because they're not regularly getting reference letters. We also need to start collecting our purchase orders. We need to start collecting make sure we've got our contracts on record. We've got to make sure you know, that we've got project closeouts, that, you know, after every project, we're trying to get that feedback. We're getting permission from clients to be contactable references, right? So we've got to be able to prove it. And yes, I mean, I think fraud is obvious. We don't want to be fraudulent. So I think we also need to be making sure we are being more proactive about the partners and subcontractors, and we are vetting them, as Thandy said. You know, I'll give you an example. We worked with a client once, and they had partnered with somebody, and you know, next thing we get a phone call saying, look, we've picked up that one of the certificates our partner's given us is fraudulent. And our client made the right decision to say, look, we can't actually bid. There wasn't enough time to find a new partner, and we no bidded that particular opportunity. But had someone not picked up that particular certificate was a fraudulent certificate,
Yeah.
What would have that done to that organization's reputation? So really, really important. And I think a lot of companies go and subcontract way too late, that they don't have time to vet properly, and they're putting their submission in and they may not pick up that, and the risk to business is extremely high. So really make sure that, you know, you are vetting and you're getting a lot of the key documents already from your partners way beforehand, so that you can validate.
It's collecting
type of information.
a portfolio of evidence. That's basically what it is having a evidence portfolio ready.
And it's certificates, it's company documents, it's CVs, it's, you know, your industry reports, it's, you know, start collecting evidence that validates your capabilities, and keep that up to date and easy to find for your tendering teams if you want to win work.
I think to go back to what you were saying, Larissa, about the planning that happens before you go to market. Firstly, like, I'm a facilitator of trainings. A lot of training companies, they have me on contract already. So by the time they get an order for a training, they'll be like, Thandy, are you available next week? You know, because we've already done that process prior. So I think also, if you are in the particular industry, do have your partners lined up already, you know, and then so that then you only have a few things to verify towards submission of the bid, you know, then that will work out better for you. And secondly, I mean, site inspections are also coming in now as part of the functionality evaluation, site inspections and demonstrations, you know, where they're going to come on site. So now you need to start preparing yourself prior, not when the tender goes out, only then. I think when on one of the documents you shared Izane was on the part where, what is this escaping me now? The procurement plans that are made public. You know, when procurement plans are made public, you already now know which department is going to be planning to go out on market with what. So by the time the tender comes out, you are already prepared. So I think preparation will definitely be your competitive advantage.
That's such an important part that Thandy's speaking about. You know, I think too often, and I know Izane we'll get into it, you know, we're talking about, you know, with the 5 Ps, you know, proper planning prevents poor proposals. But in this case, proper planning actually helps you to optimize your chances of winning business. And I think it's critical that, you know, in public sector, we actually have an advantage versus private sector, because we can be proactive, because we have access to those procurement plans to actually see ahead of time before the formal process comes out, to start positioning ourselves in those gaps that as companies we can deliver. And I don't think enough organizations are taking advantage of that. And the other important part that Thandy mentioned is there's a big move towards not just the proposal, but to presentations, site visits, demonstrations, which means as we need to shift as organizations, we also need to not only invest in better proposals and evidence gathering, but we also have to invest in being better at pitching, presenting. And so that's a big change that we've already started to see because of AI. And yet organizations are also not spending time doing that. I almost say you need to start planning that while you're doing your tender.
So, I mean, a lot of the things we're talking about is, I want to say, standard best practice, and it's not necessarily forced just because of the new procurement regulations, but the procurement regulations are making these things more important. It places more emphasis on getting these things right long before the tender does come out. But Thandy, this is where things do get difficult. So if the policy intent is sound, which we agree with, where is the biggest risk that the implementation produces? Where's the weaker? Where's the gaps? Where's the holes? Where's the risk? You're on mute.
Sorry, you mentioned the risk in what? I don't understand the question.
My question is, say tomorrow the draft regulation becomes enacted. Where are the risks, the gaps, the holes? and I'm asking you the question from a procurement point of view, and then I'm going to ask Larissa to answer it from a bidder's point of view.
But from a procurement point of view, the challenge is still the maturity of our procurement departments in terms of implementing the law as required. As I've mentioned, for example, this bucket of Chapter 4 set-asides, that you will still find organizations that don't have proper capacity and maturity, and then they'll end up using only one element of set-aside. They'll give all business to Black people or all business to women or whatever, So that is a conversation that we're still having, to say that the reason why sometimes we have this backlash from the business community is because they know our laws better than we do, actually. They know our laws and they know what we're supposed to do, and then they expect us to do that. And if we don't do that, then there's a problem. So that's where the risk is right now. And I did mention when we started that this basket of set-aside and preference, City of Cape Town right now, they came out, not City of Cape Town government, they came out to report that they have been able to implement their transformation targets without Chapter 4. They are so against this set-aside, targeted procurement, pre-qual and everything. They're like, that thing is exclusion. They provided proof that they were able to meet their transformation targets with the current legislative framework. Okay. It was quite interesting. So for me right now, I think the biggest risk is the maturity of our procurement departments, them having to properly understand the law and doing what the law it is intending to do. Because I see a lot of exclusions coming. I'm worried about that. And I see also this focus only on transformation. I call procurement a three-legged animal. There's transformation, there's ethics, there's actual procurement. And they are all equally important. I cannot focus on transformation at the expense of quality, or focus on transformation at the expense of ethical conduct. I can't just say I'm looking for a bad company regardless of anything. So that is my biggest fear, and that's the biggest risk that is out there.
So before I ask you, Laura, from the bidder side, Tani, what can procurement do about it? Well, in procurement, there's not a person or a department called procurement, but what can procurement professionals do about it?
So right now, the onus is on National Treasury. National Treasury, in terms of rolling out this thing, they need to be very intentional about it when it comes to training. One thing that they did very well in 2023, 2024, when they rolled out MFMA, it was done so well. They had trainings. They even exempted some municipalities on certain sections of the law, but they were there. That's why even you have different categories of municipalities. It was done well. So I did even mention that in one of the sessions that we had, that if you guys can roll out this act the way you rolled out MFMA, I think we'll be in a better space, because the problem is that anything that goes wrong, the one that's going to suffer is the business.
Yeah. And the business is the economy.
Exactly.
So, Laura, same question. From a bidder's point of view, where do you think the risk is? Where's the cost going to be? Where's the complexity going to be?
So, without repeating what Tandi said, I think we actually forget before the Preferential Procurement Framework Management Act was taken to court for being unconstitutional. There was a period of time, I don't know if it's 2024, you'll be better on the dates there, Tandi, than me, but there was a time where procurement was actually running quite consistently, and there was actually quite a good framework. There was a period, it was a short period, but there was a period where things were actually running. It was quite predictable. Government had sort of started to align in terms of what they're delivering. We can always debate there's one procurement office company that's better than others.
We knew what we were doing.
But it was a lot more predictable for us as bidders, I think. And I think we have to realize that this is now new regulations that are coming in. And with every new regulation, it needs to be implemented. It needs to be enforced. And then the challenge is that as bidders, as Tandi said, is that we're probably going to see an increase in case laws around potentially exclusion, around it closing opportunities, because Thandy referred to the section 217 of the Constitution, which means it needs to be competitive, it needs to be fair, it needs to be cost effective, you know, it needs to be transparent. And so, you know, and with any regulation, case laws may impact the interpretation of the regulations. And so I think it's about being diligent about that. And I think if procurement teams are doing the right market research, you know, and they are using this responsibly, it could be a very good thing and a very positive thing for our country. But if it's not, like we've seen cases where, you know, they are looking for an innovative tech solution, but the requirement is to have, you know, a military veteran-owned company, and they want them to be youth-owned. The fact that you are not going to find a military veteran that's youth-owned. So we know that there's challenges, but I also think that, you know, it's very much like the maturity in our environment is, you know, I think that, you know, Thandy talks about the procurement maturity, but I also want to give credit to the procurement profession. In many cases, they are far ahead and more professionalized than we are in the bid profession. If we look at the size of, you know, the SIPs guys versus us as far as the Association of Proposal Management Professionals, we actually have a lot of maturity to go to. And so the best thing organizations can do is stop treating the bid function, the tender function, which is one of their job creation and job functions, you know, revenue generation functions of organizations, as a tender, as an event, and start actually planning earlier on, before the tender comes out, which you can with the draft procurement regulations. But also start investing in the capabilities that your overall business development process is positioned to align the businesses to win. And that's the only way organizations are going to protect and optimize, versus just what happens is we just kind of go, here's a tender, we can respond, let's respond.
Yeah. Maturity, understanding your business, responsible bidding, I suppose. So let's get practical on the one aspect. I'm going to ask Thandy first, and then I'm going to ask you, Laura. If you were advising an executive team today, what would you tell them to do? Where would you tell them to start or review, or 5 things that they need to start doing today if you were advising? Thandy.
Okay, firstly, I would advise people to not really worry much about this regulation as yet, because it was not good. It was badly done. They received a serious backlash from us. That regulation was very badly done. I wouldn't be surprised if this will probably be effected next year towards the end, if not 2028. You know, so I think for now, don't worry yourself much about it. That's one advice I would give. Don't worry yourself much about it, because also once it's enacted, then, and also the only thing that is a big change from the current framework or current regime to the new one is Chapter 4, which is preference. And again, Chapter 4 was there in 2017 regulations anyway, so it's still not something new. So I will caution business from rushing into trying to get things to be like with the B-BBEE Act, invest money and whatever. It's good to know. It's very good to have these sessions. It's good to be abreast. But where we are right now with the quality of the regulation that we received, I don't think it's going to be enacted anytime soon. You know, but what you should be focusing on is to look at how things are changing. Madlanga is here. AI is here. you know, how is it affecting the business community? You don't want to find your company name mentioned in Madlanga, or you don't want to find, no, trust me, you don't. You don't, actually, nobody wants that, even a practitioner. You know, you don't want your company being found wanting with things that they cannot verify. Right now, because of the Madlanga Convention, a lot of procurement institutions are being exposed for not focusing on ethics as well as good governance. So be careful of things that you do. Don't misrepresent yourself. Right now, institutions of government are trigger happy. They are blacklisting for vibes, literally. I call it for vibes. Like, what nonsense is this? How do you blacklist me for not signing SBD4? You know? But
No,
they are. But they are.
that doesn't sound right.
Because but they are. So right now, procurement institutions are freaking out. Nobody wants their name to be called there. So they are very thorough and very detailed. And this is something that you guys, you ladies have been doing for the longest of time, actually. The only thing that I could take, listen to Larissa and Izane. That's all I can say. Because you guys, what you guys are doing, what you've always been doing, that you keep doing, if people can just listen to that and focus on that, they'll be okay. So yeah.
You're saying don't overreact, don't panic.
No.
But be informed.
Be informed, and please, ethics and governance now as a non-negotiable for you. You will be blacklisted for the worst nonsense ever. So pay attention to detail, sign those documents, date them, you know, don't misrepresent yourself. And there's something that you mentioned about issues of reference letters that Larissa mentioned, that I'm advocating now to the procurement community to stop creating new requirements for reference letters. When you do a job, no, honestly, you do a job in 2024, and when you leave, you ask for a reference letter in 2024. You apply for a tender in 2026. They now request creating new requirements for that reference letter. And now when you want to go back to that company, the person who signed the letter has been dismissed. Nobody wants to even want to do anything with that project. So right now, I'm advocating to say, stop recreating new requirements for reference letters. Have the basic project name, value, period, and date, signature. That's it. Don't ask that date and date. No, please. You know, because the problem is that we are losing competent companies because of this unnecessary administrative burden. You know, but honestly, guys, ethical conduct will take you far. Thank you.
On the point of reference letters, because we still have a few minutes, it is a bit of a conundrum because exactly what you say. This department wants the following 5 facts on it. This one wants different facts on it, different facts. And bidders can't go back to their clients all the time and just, give me a reference letter, give me a reference letter. It's not the client's job to continue to give reference letters. And then there's, of course, the confidentiality aspect of reference letters. There are certain organizations, and it's their policies, they do not give reference letters. You might have done the best job ever, but they don't. So it's one of those things that we all want, but it's very difficult to always get it right. Yeah. Laura, same question. If you were advising an executive team from the bidding point of view,
I'll get to that answer straight, straight away. But I also want to just talk about, at the Tender Success Summit that Thandy and I were at recently, National Treasury very, very clearly presented that, because we're talking about customers not wanting to give reference letters, that public sector is definitely not precluded from giving a reference letter and debriefing. So you can actually talk about National Treasury saying the public sector are actually able to give reference letters. So they are not one of the ones you should be struggling with to get reference letters.
In theory.
In theory, of course. I think the first thing I would say to businesses like Thandy is don't panic. Don't go and restructure your business around the draft regulations. They're still a while away. So as you said in the beginning, the current regulations remain the same. So I think the first thing is to make sure that your organizations actually understand the current regulations for the next year, you know, probably the next 18 months to 24 months, as Thandy mentioned. So make sure you understand that. You know, look at where you're exposed. So start looking early on in your business strategy, you know, how much of your current or future revenue depends on public sector opportunities. How big is your government? How big or small is government tenders as part of your strategies? Have you got effective strategies for responding and proactive strategies put in place to be a substantial part of your pipeline? And then determine, you know, what needs actual executive attention. Understand where your opportunities sit, you know, look at what eligibility requirements affect you based on the current regulations. And then that approach will just be, it's essentially a lot of the same. We're dealing with specific goals now. It's just going to be part of set-asides, or it's going to be part of pre-qualification criteria, or you're going to have prescribed subcontracting. So don't think of this. I think it's easy to think of this as a lot of changes. Actually, it's not a lot of the changes. It's very similar to what we've been used to doing. It's just going to be presented in a different way. And prepare yourself, invest in proactive pursuits. You know, the international world calls it capture planning. I know that's not a popular word for us for South Africa because of state capture, but it's about how you're going to capture or win an opportunity. And a lot of that happens prior to going to tenders. And then, of course, making sure you're filling the forms correctly. The biggest mistake is people think they can fill it the same way. Every opportunity is different. And Thandy mentioned a very important form is your standard bidding document 4, your SPD 4 or your MDV 4, which is basically your conflict of interest form. Make sure for every opportunity you're ensuring there's no conflict of interest, and that includes non-executive directors. That includes whoever you may be partnering with or forming a consortium or joint venture. That's a really important form as far as government is concerned, is to make sure you have no conflict of interest. That's one that is a strong one we see often on that tender defaulters list. So actually, I would say, make sure you understand the current regulations, optimize how you can be more proactive in public sector tendering, and then please go and look at that tender defaulters list and make sure you're protecting your business according to that. The other thing you can go and look at is the Preference Procurement Act for now, because specific goals are still one of those things that are challenging us as businesses until the act comes into play. Go and understand what sits within the procurement regulations. And if you are looking at your optimized BE strategies, go and see how you can align more to those specific goals. That's going to be a great way to start future-proofing your organization for these regulations or changes. But expect changes, expect case law. So yeah, that's pretty much
I think that's pretty good advice, and it aligns with what Thandy says. Don't panic now. Don't go and make drastic changes, but be aware of what is coming. It might not be implemented exactly like the draft regulations are written today, but it's not going to be 180 degrees difference. Yes. So be aware of that. So this particular webinar, ladies and gentlemen, we did schedule for an hour and 15 minutes because we expected some questions. And I see a few comments on here from Wellington. Yes, Thandy also mentioned that the government institutions are not equally prepared and ready, and they don't interpret it the same way, which is a big challenge for us on the bidding side, because we've always done it like this for CETA, but now another organization does not accept it this way. And so it does create a lot of confusion and could even disqualify you. Noni, you want some assistance on section 14. We've got your email address, so we'll get in touch to understand exactly what your question is. And then Motlo Leng, nice long comment here. It is better perspective, intentions. So yeah, ultimately depending on how practical and consistent the implementation is for both government and businesses trying to participate. Yeah.
I think there's, there are some exciting things coming up. I mean, we spoke about the regulations, but National Treasury at that tender submit, the head of National Treasury, I think Thandy it was, that was talking about, they are planning to move away from physical submissions to electronic submissions. There's going to be a lot more visibility in one platform. So there's a lot of tech enablement that they want to start bringing in. Again, it's going to take time, as anything does, but there are quite a lot of exciting things coming up for us as bidders to look forward to, and maybe we can organize through the APMP to do a session sometime with National Treasury. But there are very exciting things coming up in terms of the regulations. So, it's not all just a lot of stuff to get our head around, but there will be some exciting things coming up in our space. So stay tuned, I guess.
Maybe just to also add on Larissa, on what Larissa has just indicated, I don't know if colleagues know that National Treasury now has actually automated quotations for institutions of government. They're running trainings every Monday. They want to be running them on every Monday up until December. So people who are in the quotation threshold space, you definitely need to get yourself up to date with, because now the RFQs are going to be sent through that particular system. The person who asked about Section 14 of the Act, Section 14, I don't know if it's the same Section 14. I don't know if it's the regulation, because Section 14 of the Act talks to illegal instructions being given to practitioners, whereby practitioners now are actually empowered to not execute illegal instructions coming from anywhere. In actual, over and above that, they also even have to report it to the Office of the Procurement, the Public Procurement Office. So I'm not sure if the person is talking about, because it says Section 14 of the PPA. PPA is the Procurement Act. So I'm not sure if what commentary that he or she was looking for on that particular section, but it purely talks about practitioners being allowed to not execute legal instructions and taking further to report it when they receive it. And thirdly, no action can be taken against them if they actually decide not to execute such instructions. So it's one of those sections that we were very excited about as the practitioners when we got them. So I'm not sure. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for. Before I'm going to ask Thandy and Laura to close out, just my closing is, you do need to understand where you're exposed. And although, and we've repeated it, it's not law yet, but understand where you could potentially be exposed should the new act be implemented tomorrow. Where are you eligible? Where's your gaps? Who are your subcontractor partners? Are you ready with them? And strengthen your upstream readiness, your portfolio of evidence, all those things that you don't want to scramble for when the tender is out. And then we've already mentioned that there's a lot more focus on credibility and can you prove your ability to deliver. So prepare for it, but it's not law yet. Don't panic, but you need to know what is coming. So I'm going to leave the contact details on here for now. So thank you, Larissa. Thank you, Thandy, very much. I love these conversations, because they are just conversations and we're throwing around a few ideas. If anybody else has a question, you can type it in the chat. And in the meantime, I'm going to ask Laura your closing remarks, and then Thandy your closing remarks.
I think the main thing I want people to leave with is that regardless of the regulations, the tender document should not be the starting point for your strategy. By the time an opportunity appears, you should already understand the market you operate in, the buyers or customers you want to work with. We should be we should know our customers, because there's also reputational risk there. We need to be prepared for the partners that we may need, and have been able to do due diligence on them, and the evidence that we can rely on, and on contracts we can credibly deliver. Whatever changes between this draft and the final regulations, that discipline remains extremely valuable, because public sector bidding is moving further away from being just a simple document production exercise. It's much more about having integrated business capability. And if you're serious about winning, which is the name of our webinars, that's what the best organizations are doing.
Thank you. Thanks, Larissa. Thandy.
I think you ladies covered me very well. As I did say, the more things change, the more they remain the same. Right now, the basics will still get you ahead. And happy tendering.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you found value. I see in the comments a lot of people did find it valuable. Like I said, this video will be up on our YouTube channel in the next couple of days, and more resources available on our website. There's contact details there should you want to get in touch with Thandy or with nFold. And happy bidding.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.